Well, good evening. I'm Catherine Barnett, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this event on behalf of Chillicothe Public Library. Tonight's webinar is part of a series of programs and discussions inspired by our NEA Big Read book, Lab Girl, a memoir by Hope Jaron. NEA Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. And information about other related events is at chillicothepubliclibrary.org. Before we get started today, here's a few housekeeping items. If you hover over the Zoom screen, you'll see a series of tools at the bottom. You can click on chat or Q&A to submit questions and comments at any time during the program tonight. To view automated closed captioning, please click on the closed captioning live transcript icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select Show Subtitle. If you wish to hide the subtitles, click the icon and select Hide Subtitle. If you need technical assistance, please use the chat or Q&A and I will help you as best I can. This program will be recorded and made available on Chillicothe Public Library's Facebook page and YouTube channel. One lucky attendee tonight will win a copy of Hope Jaron's new book, The Story of More. The winner will need to come to the library to pick up their prize book. I'm going to launch a quick poll here, and please indicate whether or not you'd like to be entered for the giveaway, and I'll announce the winner at the end of the night. All right, thank you. Okay. In her memoir, Lab Girl, Hope Jaron writes about the wonders of trees. But in the epilogue, she reveals that, quote, every year since 1990, we have created more than 8 billion new stumps. If we continue to fell healthy trees at this rate, less than 600 years from now, every tree on the planet will have been reduced to a stump. My job is about making sure that there will be some evidence that someone cared about the great tragedy that unfolded during our age. End quote. One remarkable person who cared a great deal and who made enormous efforts to encourage tree planting and protect indigenous forests in her home country of Kenya and beyond was Nobel laureate Wangari Maathai. Her life and work are documented in the 2008 film, Taking Root, The Vision of Wangari Maathai, co-directed and produced by our guest tonight, Lisa Merton. Lisa started out her career as a weaver, studying textile design and weaving in Scandinavia, and then working in the US as a professional weaver for 10 years. Her intent was to weave tapestry and use it as an art form for social change, but instead she ended up as a production weaver. It was not until she started making films in 1989 that she fulfilled her intent to weave images that could inspire social change. She has a master's in teaching English and has taught English as a second language in multicultural classrooms. She brings her interest in education, cultural diversity, and social change, as well as her skill as a craftsman, to the filmmaking process. She met Wangari Maathai in 2002. Lisa Merton, welcome.
Thank you. I was muted. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure how many of us are here, but welcome. I'm happy to meet you. I am in southern Vermont, where it's just getting dark, where we've had a little bit of snow today. And as Catherine mentioned, yes, we met Wangari Maathai in 2002. I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened to begin with. We got a call from somebody who said they had seen Wangari Maathai and heard her speak in New York City. And they were on a board of a foundation that had helped fund a previous film of ours. And they said, would you go to the Yale School of Forestry, where she is a visiting professor, and do an interview with her and make a 10, 12-minute film about her. And so we knew about her. She was actually connected to Southern Vermont through an institution here, but we had never met her. So we got in the car and we drove to Yale and to the Yale School of Forestry. We set up in this paneled room, you know, dark woodwork, you know, maybe mahogany or walnut or some rare tree, you know, but it was dark and it was quite beautiful. And she came into the room, and I can't think of a better word than luminous. She was luminous. She came into the room. She had on a brightly patterned kitenge, a garment that was sort of hand printed and lovely. And she was radiant. She was just an extraordinarily beautiful woman. And she shook my hand, and her hand was, she had a strong hand. And we had come with all sorts of questions, thinking that we were going to be making this this short film. Going to Kenya wasn't part of the situation. It was just base the short film on this interview, and then buy some archival footage of Kenya, you know, and put something together. So we hit it off. I mean, it's probably hard to not hit it off with Wangari unless you're, you know, the former dictator of Kenya or somebody like that who might be in an opposite, opposing viewpoint to her. And I think we probably filmed for a couple of hours. Yeah, we did, because it was 4 full Betacam tapes. And we kept on looking at each other kind of in disbelief at this woman that we were interviewing, who was funny, the bravest person I had ever met in my life. This woman was willing, she put her life on the line over and over again for what she believed in. I mean, literally, if you've seen the film, you'll know that she was beaten, she was jailed, and she just spoke truth to power. She had truth on her side, and being in her presence was extraordinary. And so at the end, you know, we kept on talking, and Alan, at some point we took a little break, and, you know, he said, God, she's just so extraordinary. She's a filmmaker's dream, you know, cinematically, and in every way, because she was such a good storyteller. And at the end we said, Wangari, what if we were to make a longer film? You know, what if we were to make a feature-length film? What if we were to make a documentary and come to Kenya? And she said, you're not coming to Kenya? I didn't know you weren't coming to Kenya. How can you make a film about the Greenbelt movement and me if you're not coming to Kenya? You have to come to Kenya, you know? So things changed quickly, and we decided that was what we would do. And we went back to the funders and we said, you know, we're happy to take the money that you're suggesting, but we'd like to try to raise more money. So that was sort of the beginning of it. And as Wangari used to say, and the rest is history. And it was. We went to Kenya. And at this point, she had not won the Nobel Peace Prize. So the first trip was in June of 2004, because we hadn't been able to start right away. And then, you know, 6 months after we started, somebody called us at 5 a.m. and said, she won the Nobel Peace Prize, you know, and that changed everything. It was like, are we going to still be making this film? Are other people going to make it? What's going to happen? Because suddenly everybody wanted to make a film about her, but she was very loyal, and she stuck with us, and we stuck with her. We're still with her. So I don't know if people have questions that they would like to ask at this point. I don't know how many people have seen the film, and if you have questions about it, I'd be happy to entertain some questions, or I could show some clips, or we could do a little bit of each. Is there anybody who has a question?
Anyone who has a question yet, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A. And while people think, maybe we could just use that little, there's a raise hand tool at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you see that, Maybe just a show of hands as to who's watched the movie yet. If you can find that little tool, it might be under the more dots. Looks like we have a couple folks. Yeah, so just so everyone knows, you can watch that documentary, Taking Root, the Vision of Wangari Maathai, for free through the end of the month at that Vimeo link that I dropped in the chat there. Don't go and watch it right now, but watch it after the program. It'll be there for you. Okay. Lisa, had you been to Kenya before, or was that your first time to go?
That was my first time to go, but I was born in South Africa, so I didn't remember South Africa until I went back with my mother, but my parents both lived there for many years. So I had roots on that continent anyway. Yeah. But Kenya, yeah, it was very exciting to go there, especially being a documentary filmmaker. One gets deeply into a subject, so I had been studying and reading and finding everything out that I could about Wangari before we went there. And I'm still very involved with the Greenbelt Movement, the organization that she started. I'm in touch with them several times a week because I'm on the board of the Greenbelt Movement International, which is here in the US. So perhaps I should show a clip. Shall I show a clip?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. So this, as tomorrow is Earth Day, and there's also Biden is having a big climate conference tomorrow. This is a clip in which Wangari speaks a little bit about the climate and the value of the forest in terms of climate. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully this is going to work. And here we go. So this is in the Aberdare Forest, which is one of the 5 water towers in Kenya. And a water tower is a high place. It's not what we think of as a water tower. There are 5 different mountainous regions in Kenya, and the Aberdare Forest, where Wangari is in this shot, is one of them. And so she's telling about that in this clip. She's telling about this forest that we're in. And she had, at this point, she had already won the Nobel Peace Prize. So she had just come from a meeting with the Bishop of Nyeri, which is the town that she grew up in. And that's why she's dressed the way she is. She doesn't have her rubber boots on and stuff. She's kind of more dressed for a meeting with a bishop. So here she is.
The one thing that I know many people miss when we talk about indigenous forests is that they do not visualize this other growth and the many species of animals and plants that thrive because of this ecosystem. And because it is an ecosystem, there is very serious interdependence between these species. As I say, these farms won't grow if you don't have that humus. And of course, there would be no humus. There would be no humus if you don't have these trees that are gradually, constantly, continuously dropping their leaves. Because as you know, this is the tropics. These trees never lose their leaves at once. But they do lose their leaves gradually, and they drop, and they create this wonderful sponge that sometimes can go deep, even 10 feet. And that is something you cannot replicate. That is something only nature can create. And so it's just amazing. Something like this, absolutely extraordinary, most beautiful, growing because the environment here is perfect. It must be moist, it must be fertile, it must be sheltered from the sun and the heat and the heavy rains by these huge plants. It's just so wonderful. Sometimes I'm absolutely unable to explain what I mean. So sometimes it's better when people see and they come in the forest and they see for themselves what we are talking about. But you know, this is how Mother Nature works. This is her at her best. And this is how she would like to be protected so that we too can be protected. You know, we as the human species, we forget that we are part of this. We are part of this. This system nurtures us. We are the food we eat, the air we breathe, thanks to these green fellows who clean the air for us. They take the carbon dioxide. That's why we are saying we need to plant many of them so as to help us stop the global warming, because they take the carbon dioxide and they give us the oxygen. So millions of them. Sometimes I think we really should go around saying, thank you. Thank you so much for what you do so that we may survive.
So you get a little sense of her if you haven't seen the film. That day, after we left the forest, we came to an opening, and there was this little trickle of a stream running through it, and she was just aghast because she remembered as a child that it had not been a trickle of a stream, it had been a river. And there shouldn't have been an opening. It should have been solid forest. And we walked on a little further, and suddenly we came to these men, foresters, I guess. And they were very, very surprised to see us and surprised to see her. And she really just gave them a piece of her mind. I mean, she just could not believe what she was seeing. And she was furious, and they were like, whoa. It was a very interesting moment. We did film it, actually. It was all in Kikuyu, which is her community, the language that she speaks. And it was an interesting moment. Anyway, she could be very fierce in defense of the forest, and also of human rights, and also of women's rights, and also people who were poor. And she always made those connections between the environment and poverty, and the environment and conflict. Maybe there's some questions. I see 4 things in the chat. Are there questions? Maybe not.
We did have someone ask, oops, I'm not muted. We did have someone ask on Facebook. I think this may have been relating to something you said earlier, but asking if she lost her husband and children.
Oh, well, what happened was she had a very high profile divorce. It was sad in a way. She was a very well-educated woman. She was the first woman in East and Central Africa to earn a PhD. And I think she was, in a way, more educated than her husband. Or she wasn't, not in a way, she was. And I think that there were just a lot of stresses on them at the time. He was a politician and she was a professor, and she didn't really lose her children. She lost her, she taught at the University of Nairobi for 15 years. And at some point she ran for a government position, and it turned out that she couldn't work at the university and run for a government position. And so she was let go by the university, and that meant she lost her housing. So then at that point she was separated from her husband, and she went off to another country on the continent to work for a while. but no, she never lost her children, and she always had very close ties with them, and they with her.
If I remember right, do you interview one of her daughters in the
Oh
movie?
yeah, she has one daughter and two sons.
Mhm.
Her daughter Wangari worked with her often, worked with her all those years after the Nobel and when before Wangari got sick. And Wangari is somebody that I'm in close contact with because of the Wangari Maathai Foundation, which she's the executive director of. So yeah, they were always, all of them, close. Yeah, Wangari is the middle child. So if you'd like, I can show another clip.
Maybe before we go to that, we do have one more question.
Oh, good. I'm happy to answer questions.
This is David asks, how can we make preservation of the forests economically advantageous? So I don't know if you want to share what Wangari might have said about that, or some of your perspectives from what you've learned.
Well, it's interesting because the most recent film that we made is called Burned, or Trees, the New Coal. And it's about the biomass industry, which is essentially about burning trees for the production of energy, either electricity or heat, depending on what kind of industry you have. And to make forests economically viable, I think first we have to protect them. We're losing them so rapidly, and they're such a hedge against what's happening on the planet. They sequester carbon, they store carbon, they store it in their soils, they store it, they eat, that's what they live on. They live on carbon dioxide, so they're a natural carbon sink. And so to be destroying forests at this time is in my opinion, not a great idea, because we need every solution that we can have, and we have this extraordinary natural solution. But of course, we need timber, we need lumber. Of course, you can do selective harvesting. In this last film that we made, we were in the South, in in Georgia, and there used to be thousands of acres, thousands of miles actually, of longleaf pine in the southeastern United States. And there's like 3% of them left because they were all logged. But we went to this area that was conserved. And this guy, who was a forester, said, we have more timber here now than when we started, because we're very careful about how we treat our forests. And we are very selective. And he said, you go for quality. You don't go for quantity, you go for quality. And they grew beautiful trees. And they didn't cut that many of them, but the trees that they did cut were expensive. And economically, it made what they were doing economically viable. So that would be, I'm not a forester, but I spent a lot of time in forests, and especially with this last film, I think it's really about growing trees that are of good quality, and not necessarily more, but better. So, but I'm not a forester.
Seems like I would be interested, I don't know how this could be done, but to put maybe a dollar amount on what's lost when we don't conserve the forests, how much loss we suffer.
Well, that's a really good,
almost incalculable, but
well, there are people who have tried to do that. It's called ecosystem services, right? That's what we get from the natural world, that we get for free. We don't pay for it. It's actually our life support system. So, Wangari says that in her Nobel speech, we're threatening our life support system. And we are, we're completely, actually, there's a clip I can show you when she's talking about the 5 water towers. And she talks about how the mountains are providing, well, I'll play it for you, but you're absolutely right, Catherine. There's not really any way to put a price on what we gain from the natural world. It's invaluable, you know. Oxygen, water, food, pleasure, spiritual solace, but we're completely dependent. We're completely connected, and that's what we've forgotten, that we're part of that ecosystem. And we're so removed from it that we think that we can do without it, and we think we can destroy it, but it's at our peril. I don't know if that answered your question, sir, about the viability of economic viability of making forests pay. Maybe we should make money in other ways and let the forests be.
Did you say you had another clip to share?
I did. So I'm going to try this again, like I did before, and hope that it works. So you're going to see my, oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Okay, but I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes, okay. So this is Wangari talking. Well, you'll hear what she's talking about. Here, I'll move it to the center. Okay, here we go.
This is the upper there. It's one of the 5 major water towers in this country. The others are Mount Kenya, the Mau Complex, the Shalangani Hills, and the Mount Oregon, which is on the border of Uganda and Kenya. This water catchment area with Mount Kenya give us the largest river in this country. All the rivers that flow from this particular mountain feed the Tana as well as the people of Nairobi. Nairobi would not exist without this mountain. But I'm sure many people in Nairobi have never been here. They just hear us talking about the need to protect this catchment. The other catchment is Mount Kenya, which is to the north from here. And all the streams, most of the streams that flow from it, flow into the Tana. And Tana River is, it supports millions of people from here in the center of the country all the way to the Indian Ocean, where it opens up. And many farmers, many animals, many national parks depend on the waters of these 2 mountains. Indeed, I would say more than 70% of our people in this country, they live around these 5 water towers. So I am very pained when I see them being destroyed. And when I see the disconnect between people's livelihoods and these water towers, they look at them from a distance as just mountains and forests. Until you come inside, you don't know how much damage is being done. And people from a distance do not know how much they depend on the survival of this ecosystem. So when people say they want to come in and cultivate, or they want to come in and graze the animals, or they want to come in and grow commercial plantations, I know that they are digging their own graves. Maybe not they directly, but definitely that of their future generations.
There you go. That's what I was trying to say.
She certainly has a way to communicate, doesn't she?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's happening on this planet is that we in the Northern Hemisphere are the ones that are producing the carbon dioxide, but it's the southern hemisphere that's going to really be affected by it first in terms of drought and cyclones or, you know, extreme weather. It's a very unequal situation.
We had a couple of comments on Facebook. Joe had the comment that we know that old trees nurture younger trees underground, and without them, the forests are not healthy. So I think that was just reflecting back on our conversation about forests earlier.
Mhm.
And then Peggy asks, and this certainly connects with that clip you just played, how do you hold on to hope? What might Wangari say about hope in the face of what seems like a really, really big problem right now?
All right, well, I have to show you this clip because she answers that. Oh, where did it go? Darn. They went away somewhere, those clips. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to go find my clips because she answers that question. Hold on one second. There's always this, let's see, hope. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm messing around here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Well, I must say that when you travel along a path such as the one I have traveled, you must have hope. You can't afford to give up. And so no matter how dark the cloud is, there is always a thin silver lining. I always tell myself, just look for that thin silver lining and hold on to it long enough, patiently, as I have been saying. There are 3 words that I have learned to mention whenever I feel like I don't see that silver lining, and I say, where is that silver lining? And I say, you have to be patient, you have to remain committed, and you have to remain persistent.
There you go. I think, you know, it was over many years that the Greenbelt movement became what it is now and what it was when she died. 30 years, more than 30 years, you know, it started in 77. And it was against enormous odds. First of all, she was a woman, you know, so she just was treated abominably by her society. You know, people said she was crazy. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film or read the book, but she was ostracized, you know. And so even though many people in many parts of the world knew of her in human rights circles and environmental circles, her name was certainly not a household word, and it's still not, you know. But she somehow just persisted, as she said. She was committed and she was patient. And, you know, when she won the Nobel Peace Prize, it was such a vindication. And for everything that she had suffered through. I mean, it was not an easy time. It was devastating, a lot of it, I think, for her and for her children. And yet she just kept on going because she knew, she believed, she knew, she had great faith. She was a deeply spiritual person, and she knew that what she knew that what she knew was the truth about the natural world, and about forests particularly. So.
Thank you. Dave says in the chat, I think a big problem is people tend to go for immediate, easy to see personal rewards rather than long-term benefits to all. And that does relate to that patience. And I mean, it takes a while for these things to happen, the forests to grow and for them to draw the water up and to clean the air. It's not a human timeline.
No, that's the thing. We want quick fixes, you know, we want some kind of big mirror up in the sky that we can reflect, you know, the sun away from the earth. I mean, if we would just leave the forests and let them do what they do instead of destroying them at the rate that we're destroying them right now, it would be so much of a better solution than all these technological fixes. The answer is right there. If we, I mean, I know. It's not, it's, anyway, I see there's another question.
Yeah, I can. Do you see that one? I'll just read it out for those who are on Facebook. How does the current Kenya government view the work of Wangari Maathai and her legacy? Is there support? Because we know that under Moi, there wasn't so much.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that she is a deeply respected person in that country now. And, you know, I can post clips online and there's, you know, tons of people that will say, you know, where is she now when we need her? And, oh, you know, she's the greatest person, you know, that's ever come from our country. I mean, I think that she's deeply respected now, both by the government and, you know, I think the Greenbelt movement is supported in that country. You know, people believe in what happened during those years. They believe in what she created, and it wasn't just her. You know, it was thousands of women and men, and it was a concerted effort. But she was certainly a visionary leader, extraordinary person. Yeah.
From your experience, do you know if that respect and for her and is effective in maybe countering some of the different local corruption, or, you know, people trying to get rich by selling off forests, or these different things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Greenbelt movement for a while has not been doing so much advocacy work, because when you lose a leader like Wangari, when you lose somebody as charismatic and as brilliant and as visionary, it takes a little while to get back on your feet, you know. And they used to do, when Wangari was there, alive, there was a lot more advocacy work done. And now they're getting back in, I actually can say we're getting back into advocacy work. You know, there's a lot of construction going on in Nairobi now. There's a new highway from the airport, and then there's another highway that's going to the north, and it means that they're cutting down lots of trees, and not just, you know, old trees. They're cutting down old trees, and as the person before said, yeah, old trees are very, very valuable because they actually contain a lot of carbon, and if they're in a forest where there are older trees, it's a completely different ecosystem than a younger forest. And it makes sense to let trees grow old and not cut them, you know. So she understood all that. And I believe that, you know, the corruption piece of it is, she fought corruption, and she was very, very adamant that the Greenbelt movement needed to be transparent there, because of, she could see the corruption in the society. And so the Greenbelt movement, everything had to be above board and transparent. And she was a real adamant about that, as I said before. And I think that, she did help expose some of that in the society. And that was part of the reason that she was ostracized, because who wants to be found out? Who wants to have the finger pointed at them? But I think her brilliance was that she saw the linkages. She always made the connections between conflict and inequitable distribution of resources, or the grabbing of resources so that some people had and some people didn't. And the fact that if you're poor, you're not going to think about the fact that you're degrading the environment. You're going to think about cutting a tree because you need to cook beans for your child. And it takes a lot of heat to cook beans that have protein in them. You're not going to think about the fact that you might be cutting down the last tree. You're going to think about the life of your child. And she understood that. And that was why the Greenbelt movement compensated people just a little bit, a couple of cents for every tree that they planted that survived. And that made a difference to people. It made it possible for them to live more comfortably. She really, because that was where she came from. She came from a rural place. She grew up on the land. She grew up growing everything that her family ate. She spent all day in the fields cultivating, and long into the evenings. She talked about coming home at night after they'd been cultivating all day, singing as they came home. For her, it was a wonderful childhood, and it imbued in her this sense of the natural world. So there's not many people who kind of moved into the place she did in her life, that grew up the way she did, I think. And so she always held that. And she always could be comfortable with those women that she grew up with, as comfortable as she could be with a president or a king or somebody. She was just a very comfortable in herself person, So
You described the encounter that you had in the forest with the people who were chopping down trees, I think. But then, and she spoke very forcefully to them. And she also had these communications with the women from the places where she grew up. She talked with presidents. She talked with so many different people. And I'm sure she used different strategies and different approaches depending on who she was talking with. I think probably a lot of us find ourselves in conversations with acquaintances or friends or family about maybe climate change or maybe deforestation, things that perhaps we feel strongly about one way or another. And communication is tough sometimes. I think that's a simple way to put it, possibly. But what do you think some of her suggestions would be for having civil conversations with people, being persuasive maybe, but still connecting with people and seeing where they're coming from as well and what their needs are?
Well, I think that was one of the extraordinary things about her. She was very humble. She was not condescending in any way. She was a very good listener. But she also knew what she knew, and she was not intimidated. She was fearless in a way. Because she said, I don't imagine fear. If you imagine what could happen, then you become frozen. She would be in these situations like where she was beaten unconscious, but she said, you don't imagine what could happen. You stay where you are. You're in the moment of what you're doing. You're not thinking about that. And then you don't fear. I don't know if I have a clip about that. I might have a clip about that. the other thing was that she wasn't bitter. You know, she could have really harbored bitterness, considering how she was treated, but she didn't. She never really spoke about Moi in ways that were impolite, you know. She was, and so I think that in speaking with other people now at this time, I think that she would be polite and she would listen, but she would also be forceful. She would not be intimidated about putting out on the table the situation that we are in as a species. You know, she knew that if we were to destroy our ecosystem, our life support system, as we are doing, that we're not going to be any different than the other species that are going extinct. We're just another one of them, you know. And I have clips about that. I mean, they're devastating, but they're, you know, when she says it, you just go, yeah, all right. So I think, I mean, I wish she were here, because people listened to her, you know. They listened to her because they couldn't not. There was something about her knowing that was very forceful and powerful. And because she grew up the way she did and had that embodied the natural world in who she was, it gave her power. That's where it came from, her power, I believe.
We have another comment here from David. I think she was a heroine.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, she was a heroine. Yeah, patient, committed, persistent. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I know we don't have her here anymore, but we can hear her words in the documentary as well. She wrote several books. Her memoir is called Unbowed. That's right, right?
Yeah, that's right.
She also wrote a really interesting book called Challenge for Africa that talks about a lot of the nuances of the forest and the community across the continent of Africa. Aha, there we are.
Yeah.
And things that are applicable not just to that continent, but globally as well. And then a short, sweet little book. Ah, wow, look at that.
She signed it, that one for us. Yeah. Yeah, this book, this one, Replenishing the Earth.
That's the one I was going to say next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was her last book.
And that talks, she, in that first clip you played, she says that sometimes, you know, it's hard to describe these things. Sometimes you just have to go to the forest and be in it and see for yourself what's happening and learn about it in person in the forest. And I think that's probably important too, for people to get out and just learn a little bit about how all of this works together.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, forests, I live surrounded by hundreds of acres of forest. It's some of it's ours and some of it's other people's, but at this time of year, it's full of wildflowers and you know, all the spring flowers. And today, as I said earlier, we had a little bit of snow, we had a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's certainly where I like to spend my time, and I feel incredibly blessed to have been here all through this year of COVID and just be able to be out in the natural world. I don't know what it's like in Chillicothe.
Yeah, Chillicothe. Yeah,
Chillicothe.
we have some beautiful wildflowers as well, and
yeah,
in our woods, and some wintry weather these last couple days.
Yep.
So
I don't know if, can you see this? No, not yet. I think I could show you a couple of other clips if you want before we end, unless there's some other questions.
We do have one question. We could get to it after the clip if you like, but I'll
Right.
just read it
No,
out
go ahead.
so you can think about it. What was her action with regard to the native animals and problems with poachers? Did she do some work with that?
You know, I don't know, actually. It's interesting because a young person that I know has written a book about, it's a novel about poaching, about elephants. And I don't remember that she was involved with poaching and trying to prevent poaching, but I do remember her talking, just to give you a sense of her connection to the animal world. They planted a lot of cash crops in Kenya, starting at a certain amount of time, coffee and tea. And she said that one of the things that the Greenbelt movement did was they planted, because the birds couldn't eat coffee, they would get mad at the birds because the birds would try to eat the coffee, you know, the coffee, and they didn't, because it wasn't something that was, you know, an indigenous or something that would feed them, but they would ruin some of the, you know, the coffee bushes. And so then the birds would get killed because they were destroying the crops. And so the Greenbelt movement used to plant like millet and plant things that were especially for the birds to compensate for all of the land that had been taken up by the cash crops. And so she was very aware of the fauna and protecting it, you know. But we never talked about poaching. I think she would be utterly devastated to know what's going on there now. I mean, since I haven't been there since her funeral, which was 10 years ago, you know. I haven't been there, but once COVID is over, I'll go back. But, you know, the giraffes, the elephants, the lions, it's just appalling what's happening. I'm trying to decide what to show you. Well, this one, this will just give you an idea of how there's such delight in this. This is about the fact that she got to go to school. Wait, I have to close some things here. This is talking about having the opportunity to go to school. And it's just her smile. You can see how irresistible she is. Okay, here we go. So this is from the Yale interview. This was the very first interview we did with her. You can see the paneling in the background. You can see the bright kitenge that she's wearing. And this kind of formed the backbone of the film, because at this time, Daniel Arap Moi was still in power in Kenya. And so part of the reason she wasn't in Kenya was because it was dangerous for her to be there. So there's an urgency in this interview, a kind of urgency in her voice about her country and her land and what is going to happen there. But this is more her remembering about what it was like to go to school.
It was my brother who actually suggested, my oldest brother. It was him who suggested, why don't I go to school as well? And my mother, bless her, she agreed. She said, there's no reason why not. She herself never went to school, but somehow she appreciated going to school. So she said, yeah, let her go to school. So I went to school. No struggle. I didn't have to put any struggle. I didn't have to plead with anybody. So I went to school. I was a good student in school. And when you are a good student, you enjoy school. And so for me, school was always fun. I enjoyed every minute of school.
Isn't that delightful? I don't know. I mean, she's just,
Oh, what a treasure to have all that footage and those interviews. And
oh yeah, it's amazing. It's
Mm.
really, it's amazing. I'll show you one. Any more questions? No?
I don't think so at the moment. Maybe there would be time for one more clip if you have it, and then one more
Okay.
question perhaps.
I think this is the one. Yeah. Okay. I've got this down now, huh, Catherine?
Yeah.
So here she is. Here she is in the forest that I showed you, where she was talking about the water towers. This used to be forests like that. And so this is on this day, it was in 2004. It was before we went to Oslo for the Nobel Peace Prize. And we were planting 7,000 trees that day. And there were a lot of community people, there were people from the military, there were a lot of people planting this area that had been destroyed, part of the indigenous forest. And just a brief story, it was really hot, it was 75 or 80 degrees, and we were out there in the sun all day, and we had a lot of water in our van, and I said, Wangari, would you like some water? And she looked at me and she said, do you have water for everybody? And I said, no. She said, well, then I don't want any water. That's how she was.
What we do not understand is that we humans are only part of this ecosystem. And when we kill part of this system, we are killing ourselves. That's what we need to understand, that this ecosystem must remain as it is. It must be sustained, because in its survival depends our own.
Yeah, so that's a somber note to leave you on.
It was a little choppy, at least on my end. So we lost the last thing that she said. I think was it that our survival depends on on preserving the ecosystem.
Yeah. In its survival depends our own. Yeah. In the survival of the ecosystem depends our own. And you could see that it wasn't a closed canopy forest. It had been destroyed there, and so they had been chopped down, and so they were replanting, trying to bring it back, you know, but realizing that it's going to take a long time for that to happen. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Are there any other questions, either from our Zoom attendees or from our Facebook attendees? I guess not. Well,
Right.
we have a few more things to mention about our library programs, but before that, Lisa, oh, hang on. I didn't give people enough time to type. Oh, just says thank you. Thank you. It has been delightful indeed. But Lisa, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Get into the forest, you know, get out into the natural world and love it, because we all need to love it. We need to cherish it and love it and protect it. And if you're, you know, interested in the Greenbelt movement, you can go to the website. It's greenbeltmovement.org, or you can go to the Wangari Maathai Foundation, which is, what is it? WangariMaathai.org. Our website for our film is takingrootfilm.com. Yeah, you're putting them in the good. Yeah. And, you know, read her books. They're wonderful. especially Unbowed. Unbowed is a wonderful story of bravery and persistence and commitment and patience. I think about the linkages, you know, think about how it's all interconnected. That's what I learned from her, really, that you can't think about the environment without thinking about human rights and equal distribution of resources and women's rights and economic justice and social justice, and it's all one thing. It's like the natural world. It mirrors the natural world. Everything in the natural world is connected, you know, and so is it in the human world too. So thanks for this opportunity to talk with you and show you some clips. And I hope that if you haven't had a chance to watch the film, you will. And if you have any questions, you can always just send them to our Facebook page, which is what is it? I guess it's Taking Root Film, maybe our Facebook page. I'd be happy to communicate with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. So since we have been talking about trees, if you're inspired to do some planting yourself, I think of Wangari's story about the hummingbird, which people will have to read her book to find out about that, I guess. Does she tell the story in the film? I can't remember.
No, she doesn't.
Okay.
But if you go to the Greenbelt Movement website, there's a wonderful animated version of her telling the story, and then there's these nice drawings. They're from a film called Dirt. And that's on the Greenbelt Movement website, so you can hear the hummingbird story there.
All right, well, I'll leave it there and leave some mystery for people. But
Yeah.
If you'd like to be a hummingbird, if you're inspired to do some planting, I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of an opportunity to get some trees through Chillicothe Public Library as part of our NEA Big Read project that I mentioned earlier. And we are providing a bunch of trees which you can reserve for just $5 each. And we don't have to be a Chillicothe resident. You just have to be willing to come to the library to pick up your tree. And they'll be available to pick up May 1st at our tree planting extravaganza event. But again, if you can't make it to that day, we can make other arrangements. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the link for the online tree reservation form into the chat. That said, if you would like to reserve more than one tree, which you are more than welcome to do, just give me a call at the library. Let's see, is that going to send everything? Yeah. The form was created just to reserve one tree, but we are opening it up for multiple. So, yes, that worked on Facebook. Good. Okay. Thank you again to everyone for tuning in tonight. When you leave the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete an anonymous survey, and we would appreciate it if you could take a minute to give us some feedback about this program. And please remember to visit chillicothepubliclibrary.org for more upcoming NEA Big Read programs. We'll also post the recording of this on our website, on our Facebook page, and the YouTube channel if you would like to share it. Finally, congratulations to our winner for the Story of More giveaway. That was David G. Please stop at the library to claim your prize book, and we'll continue to give away copies of the Story of More at other NEA Big Read programs. So if you weren't a winner today, you've still got a chance. Anyway, that wraps it up for the program tonight. Take care and good night, everyone.
Bye, thank you.